Hello everyone! Today we are going to learn about prepositions. A preposition is a word that shows the relationship between a noun or pronoun and another word in a sentence. For example, a preposition can show place, time, direction, movement, position, or relationship. Things. Let's look at the main types. Prepositions of place. Prepositions of place tell us where a person or thing is located. In, at, above, over, in front of, next to, among, inside, across from, on, under, below, behind, beside, between, near, outside, against. Prepositions of time. Prepositions of time tell us when something happens or how long it happens. In, at, after, since, until, from, to, on, before, during, for, by, within, throughout. Prepositions of direction and movement. Prepositions of direction and movement tell us where someone or something is going or how it moves from one place to another. To, onto, out of, across, around, past, down, into, from, through, along, toward, up, over, under. Other common prepositions. Other prepositions can show connection, relationship, purpose, possession, comparison, or association. With, about, for, like, among, without, of, by, against, between. Now that we know the most common prepositions, let's learn how to use them correctly with example sentences. 1. Prepositions of place. In. For example, in the drawer. The keys are in the drawer. The keys are in the drawer. On. For example, on the table. The book is on the table. The book is on the table. At. For example, at the bus stop. She is at the bus stop. She is at the bus stop. Under. For example, under the chair. The cat is under the chair. The cat is under the chair. Above. For example, above the sofa. The picture is above the sofa. The picture is above the sofa. Below. For example, below zero. The temperature is below zero. The temperature is below zero. Over. For example, over the river. There is a bridge over the river. There is a bridge over the river. Behind. For example, behind the house. The car is behind the house. The car is behind the house. In front of. For example, in front of the door. He is standing in front of the door. He is standing in front of the door. Beside. For example, beside her friend. She sat beside her friend. She sat beside her friend. Next to. For example, next to the supermarket. The bank is next to the supermarket. The bank is next to the supermarket. Between. For example, between the library and the park. The school is between the library and the park. The school is between the library and the park. Among. For example, among her friends. She was sitting among her friends. She was sitting among her friends. Near. For example, near my office. There is a cafe near my office. There is a cafe near my office. Inside. For example, inside the house. The children are playing inside the house. The children are playing inside the house. Outside. For example, outside the door. The dog is waiting outside the door. The dog is waiting outside the door. Across from. For example, across from the hospital. The pharmacy is across from the hospital. The pharmacy is across from the hospital. Against. For example, against the wall. The bicycle is against the wall. The bicycle is against the wall. 2. Prepositions of time. In. For example, In 2005. I was born in 2005. I was born in 2005. On. For example, on Monday. We have a meeting on Monday. We have a meeting on Monday. At. For example, at 9 o'clock. The class starts at 9 o'clock. The class starts at 9 o'clock. Before. For example, before 8 a.m. Please arrive before 8 a.m. Please arrive before 8 a.m. After. For example, after dinner. We went home after dinner. We went home after dinner. During. For example, during the flight. I read a book during the flight. I read a book during the flight. Since. For example, since 2020. She has lived here since 2020. She has lived here since 2020. For example, for 2 hours. I have been waiting for 2 hours. I have been waiting for 2 hours. Until. For example, until 9 p.m. The shop is open until 9 p.m. The shop is open until 9 p.m. By. For example, by Friday. Please finish the work by Friday. Please finish the work by Friday. From. For example, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The office is open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The office is open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Within. For example, within 2 days. Please reply within 2 days. Please reply within 2 days. Throughout. For example, throughout the night. It rained throughout the night. It rained throughout the night. 3. Prepositions of movement and direction. 2. For example, to the market. We are going to the market. We are going to the market. Into. For example, into the room. She walked into the room. She walked into the room. Onto. For example, onto the bed. The cat jumped onto the bed. The cat jumped onto the bed. From. For example, from the airport. He came from the airport. He came from the airport. Out of. For example, out of the house. She ran out of the house. She ran out of the house. Through. For example, through the park. We walked through the park. We walked through the park. Across. For example, across the street. They walked across the street. They walked across the street. Along. For example, along the beach. We walked along the beach. We walked along the beach. Around. For example, around the city. They drove around the city. They drove around the city. Toward. For example, toward the station. He walked toward the station. He walked toward the station. Past. For example, past the school. She walked past the school. She walked past the school. Up. For example, up the stairs. He ran up the stairs. He ran up the stairs. Down. For example, down the hill. She walked down the hill. She walked down the hill. Over. For example, over the house. The bird flew over the house. The bird flew over the house. Under. For example, under the table. The children crawled under the table. The children crawled under the table.